joined with writer, director, and producer Megan Freels Johnston. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing good. I have to lead off by asking, just because I know everyone's talking about it, because you're in California, correct?
Yeah.
So how have you guys been handling the whole COVID-19 situation? Because I live in Florida, and we just got a stay-at-home order yesterday. So as
you guys are going to kill the rest of the country.
I can't really.
I'm just joking.
I can't really defend that. We just got the stay-at-home order as we're recording this yesterday, and it started today. Which I've been working from home for the last couple of weeks, anyways, so it hasn't affected me all that much. But how has it been out there?
Honestly, it's been okay. I mean, it's frustrating. I have two small kids, so it's been difficult trying to work and have them home at the same time. My husband's also working from home. His job is not as creative as my job is. I think my job, and I'm also like my own boss, so I'm kind of the one who's dealing more with the kids, just because it's like, it's impossible for me to really go right unless I remove myself from the house. But we're okay. I had a feeling something was going to happen right when Seattle had a bunch of cases, and like it really wasn't anywhere else. And I don't know. I was just having this like weird feeling, like I bet they're going to close school. I don't know why, but I literally that day via Instacart, like I spent a good amount of time, and I ordered $400 worth of groceries.
Oh, geez.
I had some sort of like premonition, because I did it way before, all the toilet paper hoarders happened, and none of that was going on yet. And I was just thinking like, I was buying like quick yeast to make bread. I had some, like, apparently I thought we were going to be in an apocalypse situation based on like, I was buying things like canned fruit and stuff that I would never buy. And pasta and like ramen noodles, and like I just like had this arsenal, which we've now gone into. But we're okay. I mean, the weather is nice here. You can still walk your dogs, and I think everybody. At least I personally, and maybe you guys will feel that too. There's such a kind of a sense of community as you're all kind of doing this together. I think my mailman and UPS people every day, and anyone who's like working a job that probably doesn't want to be or shouldn't be. And, I mean, the days are blurring together, but I feel fortunate that we can actually be sheltering at home. So just trying to catch up on movies, and it's weird times, man. Weird times.
It definitely is, and I kind of echo your sentiments, because I live by myself, but I still spent like $150 in food just because I don't plan on really leaving and going to the store unless I absolutely have to. So,
right.
It's every store I've been to has pretty much been a madhouse the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And it's been
sure.
insane. But I was talking with somebody else who lives in Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago about this whole thing, and I think we're gonna, in the end, gonna be okay with the whole thing. Like, it's gonna take some time, but I think, but it's just been insane that the sheer amount of stuff that's been shut down, and one being, essentially the film industry, because all the big releases have been pushed back. Some don't have release dates that were supposed to be coming out really around now. So have you felt that effect living in California?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually like, this year had been really, really productive for me. And I had a movie that was going to shoot in April that I just wrote, that I wasn't going to direct or produce, which I was very excited to just have something I wrote, and I didn't have to do anything else too. And so that got pushed. That was oddly a Christmas movie. And then, and then I had a thriller that was going to very possibly go this year, and possibly another one. They were kind of like competing with each other of which one was going to go first, and then also trying to juggle the festival circuit. So, yeah, I mean, it's been hard for everybody. Everything is pretty much stalled. But I mean, it could be a lot worse, and I'm just trying to be appreciative, that I get to spend all this time with my kids. But yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. No,
Everyone is working from home, and writers are still writing, and we're still developing stuff, and like that stuff's still happening. Just there are no productions whatsoever.
yeah. No, I feel your pain about the festival circuit because my short was supposed to play in 2 different festivals a couple of Saturdays ago, and both of those have been postponed indefinitely. So I know how you feel with that. But kind of backtracking a bit, now that we're on the subject of film, what was it that gave you that spark to want to work in the film industry?
I moved out to Los Angeles when I was in my early 20s. I initially wanted to be an artist, and I realized very quickly that it's very hard to make money as an artist. So I got right into the film business, and I've always loved movies. My grandfather was Elmore Leonard, who wrote like Get Shorty and Out of Sight and a whole bunch of like the show Justified. So I was exposed to that from a young age. Even though he lived in Detroit and did not live in Los Angeles, there was just still an awareness of, from story to screen, more so than perhaps a lot of people get. So I moved to LA, and then I started working for agents and managers and producers and directors, and just kind of paid my dues, and worked for a lot of assholes and just developed a thick skin and that kind of perseverance that you really need in this business. And I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do in the business, which I wasn't really sure. I landed on producing pretty quickly. I think I could have also been a manager. That interested me a lot because when I was producing in the beginning, I mean, you're really, really pitching someone else's script, and you're really championing writers. And that was something I really enjoyed. But ultimately, producing wasn't enough. And that's what led me to make my first feature. So that's kind of how that went. And I still, there are things that I just produce, and there are things that I write, direct, and produce. And there are now finally things that I just write and have no other involvement, which is somewhat glorious.
Oh, I'm sure.
You don't have to do all the brunt work, it's hard.
Yeah, you just do your job and you're done. You don't have to really worry about it. So something that I tell a lot of people, whether it's on this podcast or people that I talk to that either are in film or want to get into film, I always explain to them that there are a lot of cogs in the machine of filmmaking, and they all have to work together to make the film work. And something that is talked about, it's mentioned by name, but it's not really talked about as far as what they do, is producing. So what exactly is it that a producer does for a film?
Well, a producer what your job is to put all the elements together to make a film. So it's the director gets, I feel like, a lot of the glory, but a producer is who finds usually material. So it's whether you find a script or a book, or it could be, or you could want to base something on a video game or whatever it is. You're the one who has whether something was brought to you or you seek it out, you have decided this is the material I want to make happen. So then the producer, if there isn't a script already, if it's a book, then your job is to find a writer that also directs, or a writer first, or you get a director on board, and then you all collectively decide to find the writer. But you're the one who starts kind of putting the building blocks together. So you find the talent. You're finding the writer and the director, and then you usually have other producers, but then you have to also find the money. So is that money from a financier, or is that money from, partnering with a studio? It's different avenues to go. And then, you will then help the director come up with the cast and, all of the other key elements, because the director gets a lot of say, but producers will also veto, certain things, because a director could want, be given, okay, we'll give you $20 million to make this movie or what have you. And if the director wants all no names, I mean, they're going to get a big fat no. That's not going to happen. You have to still put elements in place that are going to allow for the film to be successful. So that's what the producer does. They're the ones who, each film is essentially like a little company, and the producers are who, put together the company.
Handling a lot of logistics.
Yes. I mean, the producers do handle a lot of logistics, but most of the nitty gritty logistics are usually more line producer, which is more the person who deals with the budget, and then the unit production manager who's dealing with the physical production. The producers are the ones who are on way before there's ever any crew and long after there's ever any crew. So they're kind of that's why the producers win the Best Picture Oscar, because they've literally been, responsible for putting together every element, and that includes choosing the right director.
Right. And again, that's something that, even at times I struggle to answer that question of what a producer actually does. So now I can tell people to listen to this podcast and they can get a fantastic answer for it.
Well, and the thing is there are different producers. Some excel very much in, getting the financing, or, whether they hire a foreign sales agent to pre-sell markets, that's all an element of producing. And there are some producers that have no idea how to find money, but are amazing at crewing up a production and know, all of the, equipment stuff and how to, that's what we call in many businesses, sweat equity. There are sweat equity producers, and then there are producers that are equity producers who are more the financially savvy producers, because different producers have different skill sets for sure. It's a tough job because you're pushing it forward. I'm lucky that as a filmmaker that I have the producing background, because I can then help propel my own films forward. Whereas a lot of writer directors if they don't have that, or they don't have someone really pushing their project, it's really hard to get it going. No one's going to push my project harder than me. So it's fortunate that I am the producer, but yeah, it's a tough, and you have lots of projects that don't end up going forward for various reasons. You just could not make it happen as much as you try, because, the producer is also does the most work before getting paid, unless they work for a big studio. It's like the independent type producers, or even when you have your own company, you're doing all that work. You're securing the rights to a book and all of these things before there's anyone paying you to make the movie or the show or whatever it is.
Right. No, that's great information to have. Now you had mentioned making your first feature. So what was it that made you decide that you wanted to go from producing to then being a director?
Well, when I got into the business, I first started producing right before the housing crisis. And so I had made a short as a producer that was Joseph Gordon-Levitt directed it, and it got into Sundance. And it was it was an awesome first thing to do. And then I had all these projects in the works. Some were horror, some were different genres. I had, pretty somewhat well-known directors attached to things, and I couldn't get anything going. And the film industry, stalled then too. And it was really hard to get financing for stuff, even if they were low budget. and I just got really frustrated. And, I'm still like working. I think at that time I had stopped being an assistant because I had already produced something substantial, and I didn't want, I was done like being barked orders to at that point because, I just been doing it for so long, and I had all these projects. So I was like, I think I was working for like a catering company on the side. Like, I don't know if you've seen that show Party Down, but that was,
I've heard of
like
it, but I've
my
never
life
seen
for a
it.
good. Oh my God, it's so funny. It's like caterers, like catering staff in Hollywood, like, working Hollywood parties and stuff. And it was, which I would run into people that I was like, had projects with. Like, I remember ducking under a table once because you still have to make money,
Yeah.
And, so anyway, nothing was getting made. And, eventually I just said, I'm going to write a screenplay that I can do for a really low budget. And I wrote one, and I had a director attached, and we still couldn't get the money. And it was like, ultra low budget. I even had, like some like lower names attached to it, which is pretty funny. And I still couldn't get it going. So then I'm like, okay. So I wrote another screenplay that I could make for really low money. And, I just decided that I would direct it because I was getting the impression that the lower I would go budgetary wise, people just wouldn't do it. And I was determined to make a movie, and it had been so long, and I just wanted to, I got into the business to get on set and create something. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to do it myself. And I was very inspired by like all those stories that you hear about people who make, a movie for practically nothing. And so that's what I did. So that was my first film, Rebound. And it was, I think I did a great job for the budget I had, and never doing it before in my life. But, obviously there's things I would change, but I just learned so much in that process. I learned so much about post-production, which I didn't really know as much about. And it just taught me that, like, oh, okay, I really love this, and I want to do it again. So, so yeah, that was how that happened. And then I went on to make another feature as well, called The Ice Cream Truck. And, it's just while you're producing and things like that. So I'm still trying to, which is one of the reasons I did a short film, because I'm waiting for my next feature to go. And you have to kind of stay strong as a director and stay fresh and, keep working with people. And so, yeah, so that was it was pure desperation is what caused me to direct my first feature, which I'm sure a lot of directors and creators can relate to that feeling.
But it's kind of like that old saying that if you really want something, you have to go do it yourself, which is exactly what you did.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I always tell filmmakers, if you build it, they will come. And I feel very strongly about that, because you can't wait. You can't just wait for someone to give you an opportunity. You have to take the opportunity. And I had done so much development and worked with directors already at this point, and had been very close getting several films going. So, I just was experienced in, going over a script and, thinking what it needs, and just having a storyteller, family background and all of that stuff. So yeah, it was a very good experience. And then at that same time, I also, like, right as that was happening, a TV pilot that I produced finally went forward. It didn't end up getting picked up, but they did shoot it in Florida, in Miami.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, so things started to pick up, and I do think productivity begets productivity in any field that you work in. It's weird like that.
Yeah, it is kind of weird how that whole thing works out. It's like when you start to do one thing that you want to do, it's like everything just kind of falls into place, like the universe is kind of working
Yeah,
in your favor.
absolutely.
What was the biggest lesson you learned in shooting Rebound as a director?
I think you just, learning how to problem solve is everything, because when you don't have a lot of money, you really have to you just have to make it work, and you don't, as an independent filmmaker, you don't really have the luxury of going over. And those young directors that think that they're going to like work their crew to the bone, who are literally doing you a favor by working at whatever they're working for, those are the directors that are not going to make it in this business, who are more concerned about getting the shot of like the coffee mug just right at the expense of like a crew who's killing themselves, for nothing, So I think, just learning to problem solve and prioritizing what's important in your film. Hopefully every aspiring filmmaker will get to a point where, they can actually just have a decent amount of money and to just shoot what they want, but it doesn't always work like that. And I think with all the tentpole movies, like all the Marvel movies and movies that are that expensive, the more of those there are that are, 200 million or whatever it is, it squeezes so much money out of the lower realm of movies, and it's making, and VOD is partially to blame for this too, and piracy, but it's making all these smaller movies even smaller and smaller. So all of these actors and filmmakers are having to work for these, with these terrible budgets, because no one wants to take the risk,
Yeah.
So it's hard for a lot of filmmakers, I think, because you have to kind of stay in this indie space for a while. And so, I would just say problem solving is a big one. Don't skimp on your post-production is a big one. Find the right favors. It doesn't necessarily mean spend more money, but you can't skimp on things like sound and music. It's very important. It's one of the most important things, I think, because you can, what it looks like on the day is fine, but post-production is how you make your film feel so much more expensive,
Well, I think sound especially is important, because you can have, and this isn't a knock to DPs, anywhere at all, but I think you can have a film that looks good, like I'm not saying spectacular, but look good and have good sound, and you can pass off the look as that was the style I was going for. But if you have,
right, for sure.
But if you have a fantastic, epic looking, on like a Star Wars level film, but if the sound's bad, no one's going to watch it.
Yeah. And it's always so obvious when it's bad.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily notice. Some people don't really notice when it's good, because it's usually good when you're watching high quality stuff. But you sure notice it when it's bad, and it completely destroys your finished product.
Yeah. I did want to say real quick, speaking of sound and music, I think with horror especially, one of the most underrated aspects of a horror film is the music. And I'll use Halloween for an example. The theme song when Michael Myers shows up. I don't think that would have had the impact without the music that it had. And I bring that up because I watched the trailer for the ice cream truck, how it had that classic, jingle that you would hear from an ice cream truck that was going on in the neighborhood. That made that trailer so much more creepy, and I loved it. I thought it was great.
Well, and that film has a lot of people said that the score of that film reminded them a lot of Halloween. There's a lot of like kind of retro synth, but it's not the same as like Stranger Things or anything like that. It didn't really jump on that bandwagon, but it's definitely a retro horror score. I think music is extremely important. And if you had seen the whole of Dear Guest, it has a really cool like Hitchcockian score. We used a real orchestra.
Oh, cool.
And it's very much an homage to like Twilight Zone and that kind of music from the 50s and 60s. It's pretty cool.
That's fantastic.
yeah,
Well,
it was really fun to do that.
well, as we start to wrap up here, I did want to talk real quick about your short film that is
Hmm.
that I watched the trailer for recently, called Dear Guest.
Hmm.
What was the inspiration behind that film?
Well, as I said before, I had another trailer that was supposed to shoot last year, and then of course it was supposed to shoot this year, and now there's another delay. But as a director, you have to stay fresh, and I wanted to shoot something because of the order in which I did things. I had never done a short. I went straight into a feature, and I just thought that this was a good opportunity. It's not as huge of a time commitment, and I can, practice some new skills, and, the equipment changes. There's always like new stuff going. So it was really fun to do. And I was very intrigued by the concept of, when we check into a vacation rental, like an Airbnb or VRBO or HomeAway or whatever, you don't really know whose house you're in. And I always feel like, are there cameras? What if the person whose house you were staying in was like crazy? And so that was the kind of the idea in terms of like how vulnerable we are when we do that. So that's what it's about. And this couple, played by Ashley Bell and Noreen DeWolf, check into an Airbnb, and it doesn't go well for them, to say the least. But it was really fun to do, and I loved working with both of them. And yeah, it was just a really good experience. And I think as a filmmaker too, like each time you make a movie, regardless of whether it's a feature or a short, you kind of get the feeling like you also want to like know, am I improving? And I felt like it felt more, even though it was a short, it felt more polished than the previous two things I had done. And so that made me happy that I did it, because you don't want to let too much time go by between directing projects, even though I've written a million scripts in between features or in between projects. But the directing is hard. It requires some money and people.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to a saying that, I heard on a podcast recently, and that is repetition is the mother of learning. And I think for
Mm-hmm.
filmmakers, whether or not it's a short or a feature, a film's still a film, and you still have to put your work into it. And you can learn a lot
For
from
sure.
just, how long did it take you guys to shoot Dear Guest?
It was only 2 days. We were one location and two people, so it wasn't, two actual shooting days. I mean, there's a lot of stuff being done like in the immediate days before. And I also always rehearse with
Right.
my actors. I think it's a really important thing that I would recommend to any independent filmmaker, because you'll save so much time if you rehearse with your actors, because it solves it answers so many questions that they have, and oftentimes they are going in a completely different direction than necessarily you had thought of, and so you then either go with their direction or explain to them what you had in mind. And I just think it's very important to do.
I think that's the great thing about rehearsals, is that sometimes actors can throw in another spin on a character that you may not have even seen before, but it actually
Yeah.
works out a lot better, because on my film, one of the actors, Jesse, who played the character of Zach, he added like this kind of quirkiness to the character, but like in a subtle way, that like the more I watched him through rehearsal, I actually really liked it. So I wanted him to add that to that character that I didn't even write. And then in
Hmm.
my mind, I was like, damn, why didn't I think of that before? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I worked with the actor Jeff Daniel Phillips on the ice cream truck, who's in like all of Rob Zombie's movies, and he's on Westworld. And he had so many suggestions for his character, and it was just so great because it made the whole thing so much stronger. And I like you should always listen to your actors. You don't have to take every single thing, that they add, but usually it's a benefit because they're the ones processing the character more than you are, I think, at least for me. So it's always important to really, hear their feedback and really take to heart the suggestions they have.
Well, I think if they do that, it shows that they care about the role, which is really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, 2 more questions before I let you go. What's one piece of advice? I know we've talked about it a little bit, but what is one piece of advice that you would give to an aspiring filmmaker?
I think what we said before, find a way to create some content. And if that's making a short or, I wouldn't really recommend doing a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo. I think people hate it. I think I had to do it once for a post-production, and I will never do it again. It was one of the worst experiences ever. I felt like I was stalking people for money, and I would not recommend it. But I guarantee most people have some people in their lives that want to see them succeed and achieve success. So if, you need to borrow some money to make a short film or something, rent a camera, do what you have to do. Because I do think it will pay off. And if your talent is there, people will see it. And I would say don't wait for someone to give you an opportunity. Just go make something. And if it doesn't get into festivals, put it online, put it on YouTube, find a way to get it out there.
I think that's great advice. And last question, do you have any websites or social media that you'd like to plug so the listeners can follow you?
Yeah, I have a website that I'm not super good at updating, but it's lookatme.films.com. It's lookatme-films, but I just I'm very excited to say that I just finally got Look at Me Films, the domain. It only took 10 years for whatever family. It was someone's family photos had the Look at Me Films domain. It's now finally mine, but right now it's lookatme-films.com. And my Twitter is #1 Megan, and my Instagram is Megan Freels Johnston, and I have a Facebook page. But if anyone's looking for something to watch, the ice cream truck is on anywhere you can rent movies. It's on Amazon Prime. It's certified fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. It's a fun kind of I wouldn't call it a horror comedy, but it's kind of like a suburban satire horror. It's a lot of fun.
Fantastic. And one good thing about, kind of the situation we're all in right now is that we have the time to watch stuff like the ice cream truck and other, shows or movies, because this is what Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu is great for. So it's a perfect opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. I'm trying to catch up on stuff as well. Yeah, I just watched all the Indiana Jones movies with my 8-year-old son. So
great choice.
Not all my programming can be adult all the time, but he's at least getting old enough that I can start to, influence him on the classics.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview. It was a lot of fun, and look forward to seeing what comes up next for you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Stay safe out there in Florida.